Hello and welcome to another Times Radio Frontline recap. Now, this is recapping the videos and interviews from the week, but I suggest you go back and look at all of them because they're all really good and give you real insights. And we're only going to bring flavours for what we've achieved this week for you to be teased up to go back and look at everything. Of course, it's on our YouTube channel. The link, I'm sure, is somewhere below. And you can find us on your favourite podcast channel by just asking your smart speaker or anything else, or searching for Times Radio Frontline. Now, what are we going to do this week? Well, it's all been about Donald Trump, Vladimir Putin, and President Zelensky. And let's hear what Donald Trump has to say after his meeting with Zelensky in Washington.
My only statement is we have to get together. It's a very small group of people. It's the president, and the president. Okay, 3 presidents. And I'm the mediator president. And I'm mediating not an easy situation. It should be easy, but it's a lot easier when people understand each other, when they get together, and when they like each other. We don't necessarily have that situation as far as like is concerned.
Possible escalation, they were not allowing the Ukrainians to strike into Russia, fearing of this escalation.
Yeah.
On Putin, is it your belief, as Mr. Zelensky said yesterday, that the threat of tomahawks and costs, as Secretary Hicks put it, is that bringing him to the table, the fact that it's kind of a carrot and stick?
I don't know what's bringing him to I think he wants to make a deal, that's all. I can't tell you what's bringing him. Sure, that's the threat of that is good, but the threat of that is always there. Tomahawks are very dangerous weapons. They're incredible weapons. If you like warfare, it's one of the most accurate. You know, we hit 30 Tomahawks in Iran after the B-2s did their damage. We sort of gave it a little capper with 30 Tomahawks from a submarine, quite far away actually. But they're an amazing weapon. They're a very powerful weapon, but they're a very dangerous weapon. And it could mean big, escalation. It could mean a lot of bad things can happen. Tomahawks are a big deal. One thing I have to say, we want tomahawks also. We don't want to be giving away things that we need to protect our country. We have a very strong country right now. We have a strong military. We have the greatest military in the world. We have the greatest weapons in the world. I want to get this war over. Okay?
Putin has stuck out his neck in many ways to make a peace deal for your war as well. What specific concessions are you willing to
Is that something that you would be interested in, Ukrainian drones?
We are, yeah, we would. We have a lot of drones right now. We build our own drones, but we also buy drones from others, and they make a very good drone. I mean, drone warfare has really come to the fore over the last couple of years because of this war. Well, India is not going to be buying Russian oil anymore. And Hungary is sort of stuck because they have one pipeline that's been there for years and years and years, and they're inland. They don't have sea. And I spoke with the very great leader of Hungary, and they are, it's very hard for them to get oil. I understand it. Hungary's in a very interesting position because they can't have ports. They're surrounded by land. So we'll see what happens there. But India will not be buying oil from Russia.
It's impossible.
No, Spain has not come through. No, Spain has not been loyal to NATO.
And here we have Donald Trump saying that maybe now is not the time for Tomahawk cruise missiles. We were expecting Zelensky to go to Washington, Donald Trump to offer him cruise missiles. That was going to send a very strong political message to Moscow and a military message as well to Russia. And clearly Vladimir Putin had been rattled because Vladimir Putin managed to arrange a 2-hour phone call with Donald Trump just beforehand. The day beforehand, and has persuaded him to another face-to-face meeting, this time in Budapest. So we talk about that in some of the interviews, just as it's all happening. And the first interview that we're going to have a look at today is with Michael Pasurkov, who is talking about just this.
The two leaders had a 2-hour phone call. That's a long time. And it was decided that they're going to first of all, have a meeting of senior advisors from both sides in a yet to be disclosed location. My thinking it would either be Hungary or Turkey or one of the Gulf states. And then yet again, Mr. Putin and Mr. Trump will be meeting in Hungary, in Budapest. It's been announced. Mr. Trump said, I believe great progress was made with today's telephone conversation. But I got it right off the bat. I've got to say, after that circus in Alaska, whereas when you and I have discussed that it seemed to have been scripted by the Kremlin from start to finish, remember that big grin on Mr. Putin's face when he jumped into the U.S. leader's vehicle, the Beast. It just seemed everything was done to please Mr. Putin. Will it be the same now? Now, we also have to remember why Hungary, because it's being led by a great friend of Mr. Putin and of Mr. Trump, Viktor Orban. So interesting there, and it's, my goodness, right on the border of Ukraine as well, relatively close. So I have a hard time believing that Mr. Putin won't give up his usual ways of trying to run circles around Mr. Trump. He's a master at this. But I think, again, we're seeing Mr. Trump feeling he has momentum, feeling he has the wind in his sails to, really reach another big accomplishment of his second term, and that is solving the war here in Ukraine. We don't get any indication whatsoever from Mr. Putin that he's prepared to come to the negotiating table. But if we think to what was achieved, especially getting Israeli negotiators to Sharm el-Sheikh to meet with Hamas leaders, that's quite an accomplishment. Maybe he could pull it off here. We'll see. But I can't help but be skeptical, because there's one thing that Mr. Putin wants, and that is to have all of Ukraine, not just parts of it, all of it. And of course, if that happens, that is the end of the Europe, that is the end of the NATO that we know.
And what does this mean for Zelensky's meeting with Trump tomorrow?
Yeah, well, I think it's a good development in that sense, where Zelensky will have Mr. Trump's ear face to face. Mr. Trump deals much better with people face to face, and he'll be able to put things very straight to him. Say, look, this war has to finish. And if it doesn't, whether we get your Tomahawk missiles or not, we're preparing to inflict real pain on Mr. Putin's Russia, especially the energy sector. There are also moves by Mr. Zelensky to offer Ukraine's vast network of pipelines to Europe. I think he's also going to propose joint projects in arms manufacturing, sharing Ukraine's amazing technological development since the start of the war. So it's always best, I think, in these things to speak afterwards, to be the second one, because you're the last one to whisper into his ear. And, credit to Trump for doing what he has in the past, few days, but he does have that short attention span. And I think that will work to Mr. Zelensky's benefit to be speaking to him after Mr. Putin. One last thing, we've been hearing again from Mr. Trump about, and as recently as the Sharm el-Sheikh meeting, about ending the Ukraine war, about the number of casualties each and every day. I did not expect to hear myself saying this on air, but I have to say it, is that I think the death and destruction, as we saw happening in Gaza, but also as we saw happening with the hostages on the Israeli side, has actually impacted Mr. Trump. He does seem to feel for them. And, his interesting element here, too, is Melania Trump has inserted herself into the war that none of us expected to, in writing that letter to Mr. Putin that was given to him in Alaska, saying that I'd like to play a part in helping the exchange of children from Russia to Ukraine, and the other way too. So when you take all of these things together, there's a kind of new momentum since Alaska that may lead us to a leader summit of Zelensky and Putin, maybe with Mr. Trump there. One last quick thing, given the geography, Hungary is very close to Ukraine. They're a neighboring country. We can't rule out Mr. Trump calling Zelensky and saying, hey, come right over, let's get this summit done. and maybe we'll have interesting results.
Now, Michael is talking about the meeting happening in Budapest. What he didn't bring out, I don't think, is that we have to remember the Budapest Memorandum is the one that had originally been signed by the United Kingdom, the United States, Russia, over this, and the United Kingdom over the security of Ukraine. Is this going to be Budapest Memorandum 2.0? Interesting that it's a European country. It's going to be interesting to see how Vladimir Putin gets to fly to Budapest. And after the previous meeting in Alaska, where it was quite clear that Vladimir Putin took control and got what he wanted out of it, and I'm beginning to see some reports that he gave Donald Trump effectively a 2-hour Putin's view of history lesson on Ukraine, which upset Donald Trump ever so slightly. But whether he's going to get the same when he goes to Budapest, whether this is Putin playing him, well, Michael's got some quite good views on that, as do some of our other interviews today. The next one that I'll point you at is with Hamish de Bretton Gordon, my old friend. And again, this is after we've had the Trump-Zelensky meeting and the Trump-Putin meeting, and we go into detail of examining what Hamish thinks of the outcome of the meeting and what's going to happen next.
I suppose Trump, full of bravado after his very successful trip to Egypt and Israel at the beginning of the week after the unlikely but very welcome ceasefire that he seems to have managed to organise in Gaza. We're all rather hoping that he would be focusing and do something similar in Ukraine, and that's exactly what he said he would do. The meeting yesterday, we understood before the meeting that Putin and Trump had agreed to meet in Budapest in the next 2 weeks. And the irony of Budapest, should not be missed by anybody. It was, of course, there that the Budapest Memorandum was signed in 1994 by the Americans, by the UK, ourselves, and by the Russians, guaranteeing the security of Ukraine when they gave up their nuclear weapons. Wind forward to today, and we're in a very different position. So the choice of Budapest, I presume, because Viktor Orban, president of Hungary, it seems to be the closest European leader to Russia, and it is probably the only country in Europe that Putin could go to that he wouldn't be arrested in. So, yeah, really extraordinary activity that's going on, and what really did Zelensky get out of yesterday's meeting?
Well, it's interesting. I think I saw Trump, or a statement from Trump, where he said or confirmed that it could be being played by Putin. I've seen some commentary on what went on in Alaska, and apparently at the summit in Alaska, Donald Trump got really quite annoyed because Vladimir Putin just gave him a couple of hours of Putin's view of the history of everything that was going on, and was refusing to give in and negotiate a ceasefire. Do you think we're going to see anything different in Budapest, or is Putin just playing Trump as he seems to always have done?
Well, yeah, I think it's no doubt that Putin is playing Trump rather better than Trump is playing Putin. But having said that, or certainly somebody like me, very close supporter of the Ukrainians, were hoping that these long-range Tomahawk missiles would be released to Ukraine, because we're not talking about game-changing here, but really significant. And the mention of Tomahawk missiles seems to be the thing that has precipitated Putin's call to the White House.
Do you think he's genuinely worried about them?
I think so. I mean, I wrote a piece in the Telegraph yesterday exactly about this, and then did a running commentary with people who commentate. And there was a whole range of issues being discussed, and not least, bizarrely, there are quite a lot of Russian bots and pro-Russians who buy the Telegraph, as I'm sure who buy the Times as well. And the vitriol coming out of them about these Tomahawk missiles. Now, you and I saw them in many campaigns over the years, but some people were sort of saying, well, these are old weapons. Well, to a point, they are they are well trusted and tried weapons, and as we know, they are regularly updated.
Mm-hmm.
So the Tomahawk missiles that we would have seen in the Gulf in 2003 or other operations are not the same Tomahawk missiles that are available now. They are very much uprated, and I think the Russians are really frightened. The Tomahawk missiles did a number on the Iranian air defense assets when the Americans attacked nuclear facilities there. So we know that they are highly capable. I think the Russians are concerned that they actually won't be able to knock these things down. Although they're not hypersonic missiles, but they're pretty clever the way they nap of the earth flying and then hit their targets. And it seems clear the Americans are still giving the Ukrainians a lot of targeting advice.
Yep.
So, I think the Russians are really concerned about these Tomahawk missiles, and they seem to have been, and I think they still are a key bargaining pitch. I was just rereading what Trump had been saying last night in the White House, and he has not turned the Tomahawk issue off at all. It's an ongoing thing, and one assumes that this is going to be a key bargaining chip in Budapest. We know how much the Russians don't want these Tomahawk missiles. So what are they prepared to do in order that they don't go into the Ukrainian hands? So that might well be significant. I mean, Trump also said, it is time that Zelensky spoke to Putin and they agreed some sort of peace. And he's sort of suggesting you should freeze the front lines as they are now and then go ahead. I think, conversely, very interesting listening to the president of Finland this morning on the Today program, Radio 4, talking about this and actually sort of being rather more upbeat about European defence and what Europeans prepared to do. And Finland, that has had to trade land to the Russians over the years. I mean, he did not discount that Ukraine should get some of its territory back, and he said, as leader of Finland, he would never accept that Crimea was a part of Russia. So, and Europe seems to be galvanizing itself. Also, this week we heard about the 4-point plan to defend Europe with various drone shields and other shields and everything else. So, that must be a galvanizing thing, I think, for the Ukrainians. So, come the Budapest summit, wherever it is, I still think that there is something to play for the Ukrainians. I think it's really disappointing that Zelensky is not sort of not flying back to Ukraine with Tomahawk codes in his pockets, as it were. But if this is a key bargaining chip, then let's hope that Trump plays it appropriately when he meets Putin in whenever it is, 2 weeks' time.
And of course, Hamish is talking about this being potential for Budapest 2, for Putin not really giving anything in. And we expand the discussion to look at what's going on the front line and what's going on militarily as well, and the potential threat that there is out into the West. And on the front line, he quite eloquently describes how it's still at a stalemate and is likely to remain at a stalemate, and the casualties that the Russians are suffering remain huge. So it's interesting to see how that's going to translate into the discussions that go on in Budapest. But we also discuss the fact that the Russians are being aggressive in their attacks into the West. We've seen their use of MiG-31s over Estonian airspace, drones over German national infrastructure, Danish airfields, Swedish military bases, and of course the Russian Shadow Fleet and Russian ships hovering over undersea cables and pipelines and other things. And we discussed the implications of that with Hamish's speciality, chemical, biological, radiological and nuclear. Of course, the Russians carried out a chemical attack in the United Kingdom with the Novichok attack in Salisbury in 2018, and before that, a few years, with a radiological device with polonium-210 on the streets of London. So Hamish's insights are, as ever, absolutely fascinating. And the third and final interview I want to point you at this week is with Maxim Tucker. We go into something different. Now, Maxim from the Times, we start to highlight an area of the conflict that isn't talked about much. Here he is.
It's very cloak and dagger, as I said. It's very in the article. It's conducted by stealth. They don't want people knowing much about the details of their operation, and the fighting is not the same as it is in the Donbass, where it's big artillery duels and advances en masse and trying to kind of force breakthroughs. It's landing on islands in the thick of night, under cover of storms. 8-12 Marines paddling across in rubber dinghies and landing, hiding in the bushes and ambushing Russians and clearing out positions and then disappearing back into the reeds. And this is going on daily. The Russians are trying to land on the islands. They're trying to build up what could be used as a bridgehead to retake Kherson, which is still one of Putin's ambitions, as he believes Kherson is now part of Russia, having claimed to annex it. So he's still got those territorial ambitions. And the Russian aim is to build up forces on the islands of the Dnieper Delta in order to be able to then cross onto the Ukrainian-held bank. And the Ukrainians have tried this on the other side. They tried to land in Krinky to kind of support their counteroffensive, which ended very badly for them.
So, give those that are watching this and listening to it a flavour for just how big the Dnipro Delta is and how significant it is from a strategic perspective in the conflict.
Yeah, so the Dnipro is an enormous body of water. At some points it's a kilometre to 2 kilometres across. Some of that has been made even wider because of the blowing up of the Novakhovka Dam. So it's wider but shallower. It's really difficult terrain to fight in. It's very swampy, marshy. There's lots of mosquitoes in the summer and in the autumn. And there's a lot of animals going around there as well. So some of these Marines were talking about when they're trying to hide in the bushes and creep up on the Russians, they get startled by a goat or a deer that just kind of bursts away from them. And a lot of it is trying to land on these islands unseen and then hold that territory and stay there, keep it occupied while Russian drones are buzzing in the air above you, and to stop the Russians getting a foothold and to observe what the Russians are doing. And the Russians apparently are trying to make daily landings on these islands. There are dozens of these islands of different sizes. Some are very, very large and a few kilometers wide. Some are much smaller, and all of them are being contested. And it's a very difficult battle to fight because you can't afford to be spotted because you can't really dig in. A lot of the cottages there were a lot of kind of country dachas that were on these islands. They've been destroyed by floodwaters or destroyed by fighting. And if you try and dig in, you just meet the water level almost immediately. So Marines get kind of left sitting in wet holes when they're under fire because they have no option but to do that.
But this is very much a traditional commando and special forces battle. Are you seeing equal troops on both sides? The Ukrainians are putting some of their best trained commandos into dealing with this. Are the Russians doing the same, or are the Russians using the conscripts that we see further up on the traditional front line in the east?
The Russians have their Marines there as well. They're people who have experience using boats, but obviously Russians forces and the Marines particularly have been very heavily affected by this war. They've taken a lot of casualties. So some of these soldiers will be new contract soldiers, not conscripts per se, but people who signed up recently or have been mobilized as part of these mobilization waves that Putin keeps announcing. So there are some experienced troops going up against the Ukrainian Marines. The Ukrainian Marines, a lot of these have been trained in Britain. Some of them have been trained by the Royal Navy Marines. And they've been better used to working with boats than the kind of other infantry. The brigade that I actually spoke to, they'd been pulled out of fighting in the Donbass in Turetsk, and they'd been nearly decimated, this Ukrainian brigade, and reformed as a coastal defense brigade. Some of them had trained in the UK as part of Interflex, their kind of regular infantry training. And they're going to have more training as part of the kind of Marine Corps as they kind of step up and go from being basically an infantry brigade into being a full Marine brigade.
Mm-hmm. Did you manage to get an impression from any of them as to what they thought of Operation Interflex and whether it gave them the basics that they needed to then build on?
So it was very interesting. I think a lot of people have a lot of different views about the UK training. A lot of them say it's very good for this kind of basic, the first aid, the hostile environment, getting used to digging in, getting used to taking cover, moving in small groups and things like this. but a lot also saying it's outdated in that it doesn't account for the use of drones in the way that we see on the modern battlefield. And maybe that's something that a lot of these Marines have been trained, a year, 2 years ago. Maybe that's something that's being updated. I'm sure it's something that's being considered as how drones are just prevalent on the battlefield and guiding everyone. But they didn't feel that they had been trained as to how to take cover from drones. And actually they had a lot that they would be able to share with their British counterparts now. But I think one of the really important things from this is the sense of support that they get by going to a European country, by going to the UK, and feeling that there's a camaraderie. And a lot of them remember their instructors. They have fond memories of these instructors and the jokes they used to make and how they got on there. And I think that stays with them, and that gives them a kind of a sense of moral support in the most difficult times that they face.
And this is where Maxim is talking about an article that he brought out in the Times about the fighting in the Dnipro Delta, the Ukrainian Marines and Special Forces against Russian Marines, and the way that drone boats are helping the Ukrainians, the way the fighting is going on island to island, capturing little bits and then them being taken back again. A complex, difficult environment, but one that is quite a large area. And Maxim's insights, having spent some time with the troops on the ground there, are absolutely fascinating. So don't just watch the clip. Please go and watch the whole interview, and do that for all of the ones that I pointed you at today, because they're all good. And even the ones I haven't pointed you at, they're equally good. So get off and see those. But thank you for watching our recap. If you want exclusive access to our videos early, please sign up for Times Radio membership. And of course, as I said at the beginning, you can get us on your favourite podcast channel or podcast outlet by just searching for Times Radio Frontline. Thank you. Goodbye.